Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ash here coming at you today in Clash Royale with a guest who hasn't been on the channel in quite a long time, Rum Ham. How you doing, man? Welcome back.
Doing great. It is morning here in sunny California, and I spent all yesterday playing Mega Knight. I played Mega Knight Challenge at 5 in the morning. I unlocked him on the first try, and I spent till
Congrats,
about
man.
middle of the night playing him.
What deck did you use unlocking him?
Unlocking him, there's a video on my YouTube channel where I share the deck, but I went similar, I guess, to the Chief Pat route and ran P.E.K.K.A. and Mega Knight, the Bash brothers, the two big boys, although I guess P.E.K.K.A.'s a girl, the big brother and sister of Clash Royale. I found that to be a really fun, heavyweight style deck. That's the sort of Clash Royale that I like to play. I mean, I like to play Golem and P.E.K.K.A. and things like that. So being able to put two 7-cost tanks in the same deck was a blast.
Absolutely. Did you play it? Didn't Pat use the Hog version? Is that what you used as well?
No, I actually thought Hog Rider was like miserable at the challenge. I said that on my channel, and a lot of people were ragging on me saying that they got 12 wins with Hog Rider. So, I mean, good for them, right? But in a world where Mega Knight hard counters Hog Rider, like it doesn't get any damage on the tower, and a lot of people were playing P.E.K.K.A. because of how P.E.K.K.A. hard counters the Mega Knight, I always at least felt that I had a very strong card to defend against Hog Riders that started, I mean, lethal counter pushes. So I personally didn't want to run Hog Rider in the challenge. I ran, it was P.E.K.K.A. Mega Knight, and then I assumed that because of all the P.E.K.K.A.s around, I would want Inferno Dragon, because it's good against both Mega Knight and P.E.K.K.A. And then I packed Electro Wizard to counter the Inferno Dragons and to slow down the big tanks. And then the remaining 4 cards were just, the kind of cheap cycle spells and small troops to get you back to your big stuff.
Nice, man. Well, congrats on getting it on your first try, man. It took me 4 or 5 tries. I got it on my 5th try, but I did go 2, 11 in 3s. Brutal, but we finally got there using hog decks. So maybe that was my problem, right? So today's video, what I want to talk about is the Mega Knight. I also want to touch on what power creep is and how it affects Clash Royale. It's kind of a general term used for a lot of games with a bunch of different updates, basically new cards added and with varying powers. I also want to talk about how Mega Knight and the recent balance changes all kind of combined together will kind of form to affect each of the general archetypes. So let's start out by, you said you were playing Mega Knight all last night. How do you like him? Do you think he is really super OP, or do you think he's just powerful, or do you think he's maybe not powerful at all?
I'm pretty convinced that Supercell created Mega Knight just for me. Like, I'm pretty convinced that they read my brain and they're like, what sort of cards would Rum Ham like to play?
Well,
Let's
you were
make
high on this guy for a while, man. When you
so
announced
excited.
the cards.
Well, there hasn't been a big new win condition added to the game in a while, not like a tanky one. Like, when was the last time that a major sort of tank win condition was added to the game? I think it was Royal Giant back in beta in the very, very first update that added new cards. I mean, I guess I'm saying Lava Hound. Lava Hound came shortly after. So you're right. So, like, Royal Giant and Lava Hound are about a year old, and since then we haven't seen any major tank cards. And as somebody who's played, 1,000 games with Golem and 1,000 games with Giant, I was ready to try out a new tank, so I was very excited about it. The good news, I think, for a lot of people, in your first impression, you see this card, he's insane, right? Like, he does so many things. He does more than any other card previously released, and you can tell because his stat card doesn't have room for all the stuff he does.
It's true.
It overflows. My first impression when I saw him was actually that it was, like, unbelievably overpowered. Like, when you see them all at the same time, right? And I remember going, oh, Mega Knight is going to be, in the dev build, like the most powerful card ever released. It's insane. I was telling the Clash Royale team, I don't think you can release this guy at 7 Elixir and all that stuff. But 2 things happened before he came out that I think prepared the meta for him. Inferno Dragon got a buff. It's a very hard to remove defensive card that does great against Mega Knight. And P.E.K.K.A. really largely came into the meta as probably the most popular deck. I mean, P.E.K.K.A. Hog, from watching these CCGS tournaments, seems to be the sort of leading archetype that most people are playing, and P.E.K.K.A. has a great matchup against Mega Knight. I do think that if this was a year ago, if we were talking in summer of 2016 and Mega Knight came out, it would be like throw up on yourself. It's so good.
Game breaking. Yeah.
Right. But the recent trend of releasing cards with multiple mechanics has actually made Mega Knight not as out there in left field as I think we all originally thought.
Yeah, oh man, I have been all over the place on Mega Knight. My subscribers will know that I've said Initially, I was pretty high on him, and then once we actually got to play him on the dev build, I got a little bit higher. I think I ranked him like an 8 or 8.5 out of 10. And then, like the day before the challenge went live, I was like, forget it. I played some gameplay against Eclipse on the dev build, and I was like, this guy is game breaking. Forget it, man. He's a 10 out of 10. He is next to the Night Witch as far as how much he adds to or how powerful he can be inside the current meta. But then now today, I am all over that. Like I said, I'm a huge flip-flopper here. Now today, I'm starting to see him actually used in competitive matches and CR Worlds and stuff like that, Plex Chat Worlds and stuff like that. I'm actually seeing him in RPL. And now, like you said, I think it does make an interesting dynamic. I think that it's weird. One of the decks I'm seeing him most often running right now competitively, and I'm wondering if you've been seeing the same thing, is in bait decks, surprisingly. Have you been seeing that at all?
Yeah, he's a really versatile card. So, like, I think my first impression was like yours, right? That he's like a 10 out of 10. Oh, my God. And then the thing that actually changed my mind on him was going out to dinner with a bunch of pro players during the spring CCGS, and I let them play on my dev build. I, like, watched them play, you know, like, hey, like... No, it's totally fine. Like
I'm just joking, man. I'm
joking. Totally fine. As long as they're not posting to Twitter and making videos on my phone, it's all right. But they're allowed to play while I'm watching them. That's okay. I got that. I got that verified. I got that checked by the thought police. It's okay.
Just kidding with you.
I know. But that's funny because everyone had the same impression, right? Like, oh my God, you're gonna get shot out of a cannon into the moon. But like, no, it's okay. As long as they're not publishing, it's fine. Well, anyways, so I go out to dinner and I hand it to Surgical Goblin. I hand it to Adrian Piedro, and I'm like, dude, play with this card. Like, what do you think? And they immediately started brainstorming solutions. And by the end of that dinner, I felt actually a lot better about them because they were like, things like Ice Golem plus Bats will probably counter them. And they were right. Like, there's a lot of ways with 7 cost, with a 7 elixir cost, there's a lot of combinations of 2 to 3 cards that you can counter him with and still spend less elixir than 7, equal to or less than 7, right? Not to mention you get things like P.E.K.K.A. They're just a great one-on-one battle. But I do think you're right. He's like an 8 out of 10 card. Like, there's no debate that Mega Knight is in the bottom half of cards, or even really the bottom, like, 2/3 or 3/4 of cards. The question is, like, is he just a good thing added to the meta, or is he the best card in the game, overpowered, needs to see a nerf? And I'm with you, man. I'm like waffling in the middle. I don't really know how I feel about him yet. The thing that really stood out to me in day 1 of tournament play, like you mentioned, is he was in a huge variety of decks. Between the splash damage, the leaping, the good stats for his cost, the knockback, the stun, like there's so many little effects that he has that all add up that we saw Mega Knight played in bait decks, replacing the Knight. Like, they upgrade the Knight to the Mega Knight and sort of have this big central defense into offense card that they can center a lot of their bait tricks around. I saw him in 3 Musketeer decks, replacing the P.E.K.K.A., like a P.E.K.K.A. 3 Musketeer style deck, but they'd run Mega Knight instead. He was in new archetypes, like the P.E.K.K.A. Mega Knight combo. It's not just for the Mega Knight challenge, but Berenstein Cat won one of the North American CCGS Day 2 tournaments with the big boy combo. And I mean, he's just being seen in such a variety of decks that I don't know if people have yet figured out where Mega Knight's going to settle, but the versatility has allowed it to go in to really anything.
I know. That's the crazy thing about him. That's why I love the card, and I know you do too, based on previous conversations I've had with you, is that, like, if you take away how powerful is he, I think that just all the effects that he brings to the arena with him is really incredible. I mean, like, he's so versatile, and it's so cool to have a tank card in the game that's not always played behind the King Tower, right?
Yeah, definitely. Like, we're seeing a trend. We mentioned that a little earlier. We're seeing a trend more towards multi-mechanic cards, or cards that do 2 things. Like, and I think this is just a natural evolution of designing cards in a game like this. Like, for example, when the game first came out, when you're creating the initial 40 Clash Royale cards, you know what kind of stuff you need, right? Like, we need a big tank, we need a range damage dealer, etc. They're not going to make a better Giant. You know, Giant costs 5, has as many hit points for the cost as you can possibly have. They cannot make just like another Giant. So you've made the best version of this very one-dimensional mechanic, right? Attacks buildings, cheap, lots of health. When it comes back and you got to make another Giant kind of card, you have to be a little different. And that's when you get things like Ice Golem. Ice Golem has a similar health point to cost ratio, also only attacks buildings, but in order to make it a little different, the cost has to be dramatically different. It has that little explosion effect. It's got the little slowing effect. If if they made Ice Golem just like a 4-cost tank that went for buildings and had a lot of health, people would be like, we already have Giant. What's the point of this card? So I think you're going to see a lot more variety in future cards simply because, you know, we already have a Musketeer. We already have a P.E.K.K.A. We already have a Giant. It's hard to make these one-dimensional cards better than the existing meta powerful one-dimensional cards. So instead, we're going to start to see these sort of versatile multi-mechanic two-dimensional cards, and I think that's really going to open up deck building options in the future.
I agree. I couldn't agree more, actually. This is one of the points that you made in the past that I absolutely resonates really strongly with me. I absolutely agree. I love multi-dimensional cards. I'm excited for this kind of new life in terms of new card releases in Clash Royale. However, it brings me to my main point that I want to ask you about. I saw you, I forgot where the heck we were talking about this, but I saw you kind of mentioning the idea of power creep in one of our chats or something. And you had some maybe mild concerns, if I'm not mischaracterizing that, about power creep, what it is, and how it might affect Clash Royale going forward. Can you just start out by telling us what power creep is, and then we'll move on to talk about what implications it may have?
Power creep is a term that originated in Magic the Gathering, I know a game that you and I both love very dearly. Magic the Gathering was one of the first games, and really maybe the first game, that it's been going on for 20 plus years now, and they've been releasing new cards every 3 months for about 20 years. Well, over time, you have this feeling of like, well, they got to keep selling the new set, and how do you sell the new set of cards? Well, one way to do it would be to make cards that were slightly better than the cards before it. So if I had been playing a card that cost 1 to deal 2 damage, and then you print a card that costs 1 to deal 3 damage, like obviously that's the better card. I'm going to want to get my hands on that card and buy the new set. But kind of like the word meta, it's sort of gotten runaway where people sort of see any good card as an example of power creep. I actually don't think there's too much power creep in Clash Royale, simply because so many of the core 40 cards are still viable. I mean, like really almost, actually, as a side note, almost every card is viable. I've been watching the CCGS, and just over these qualifying tournaments and the 20 win challenges, I want to say honestly, like 65 out of 75 of the cards have been in like reasonable tournament winning decks. So wow. The spread is great. I mean, if people complain about the meta, this is the meta you're looking for, right? If anyone complains about this meta, just block them on Twitter. Like there's nothing to complain about. Every card seems viable in some way or another. The cards that aren't are like Bomb Tower, Rage, like stuff you're not even thinking about. You know what I mean? Stuff that you're not even dying
to Rip Sparky.
Sparky's in there.
She's in there.
Nem Sensei won at CCGS Spring with the Sparky deck. So it's like it's there. It may be a super tier 3 deck, but it's you know, it's around. Okay. Anyways, so a good example of power creep in like a technical term would be the difference between four body skeletons and 3 body skeletons, right? Like obviously it's the same card and they didn't exist at the same time, but 4 body skeletons are just strictly better than 3 body skeletons. If both of those cards existed as separate cards, you would never play the 3 body skeletons while you had the option of 4 body skeletons. What I think we're seeing, though, is not so much a power creep in pure stats. Like, we're not seeing a strictly better knight or a strictly better giant. But what we're seeing is power creep in versatility. We're seeing cards that can be used in multiple ways, sort of supplanting the cards that are very one-dimensional. And this isn't always true, but let me give you a good example. Battle Ram compared to Hog Rider. There was a period in time where Battle Ram decks were all over the place, and Hog Rider was like kind of not really seen. Hog Rider's only recently come back with the nerf to Battle Ram. And part of the reason why was that Hog Rider, while great on offense, doesn't really do anything on defense. I mean, the best thing you can do is play a Hog Rider and hope it like drags something towards it as it runs and jumps over the river. But Battle Ram had a lot of versatility on defense. You could use it. The Ram sort of functioned like a shield that could absorb a Sparky shot or a big P.E.K.K.A. hit. It dropped 2 Barbarians afterwards that could be used as a very reasonable defensive card, while still maintaining that not just high power on offense, but really versatile on offense. Like it was a charger. It was it blocked spells. Like if you used a lightning or rocket or whatever on it, the Barbarians under survived, which would not be the case for a Hog Rider. It was good at fighting Inferno towers. It was good at hitting towers. Like Battle Ram just did a lot more. And in the hands of a skilled player who could remember all those different lines of play and deploy them at the right time, Battle Ram was a better card than Hog Rider because it was more nuanced and had more situations to use it in. Now it's a little more balanced, but I think we're seeing that with every new card release. Cards like Night Witch and Electro Wizard and Mega Knight just do so much that it's very easy to be like, oh God, why would I play Valkyrie when I get a Valkyrie just by playing Mega Knight, and then it does so much more beyond that.
Exactly. Like, and you just kind of touched on it, kind of like Ewiz versus Musketeer. If you had a max Ewiz and a max Musketeer, it's hard to make the case, except for maybe very niche situations, to play that max Musketeer over the max Ewiz in most decks, you know? So if you were the developer, a CR developer, what would you do to make sure this doesn't kind of ruin the balancing in the game long term?
There's a very standard design process with collectible games, pioneered again by Magic. We can reference Magic all day, but generally speaking, you want your lower rarity cards to be simpler. Because the idea is if I open a new booster pack of cards or I'm new to the game, most of my collection is going to be commons. I don't have access to epics and legendaries. I want them to be real straightforward stuff. Knights, giants, musketeers, things that I can just get right away. And as I get better at the game and I can handle more and more complex situations, well, then in Arena 5 or 6, I unlock my first legendary, and it's Lava Hound. And I go, oh, okay, wow, this is a weird card. It costs a lot. It's a flying tank. It's really slow, but when it dies, it turns into like a minion horde. That's a lot going on compared to my giant that I've been playing this whole time. But you can handle it because you're deep into the game. Now, I think the danger of that in the very long term is that it's hard to get legendaries, and it's hard to get your epics max or kept up with the rest of your cards. And the problem is you can be a very educated, very well-playing free-to-play player, but if your collection is almost entirely commons and rares because your epics are falling behind and it's hard to get legendaries, and especially 2 to 3, 4, 5, 6 copies of a legendary, you are stuck with less versatile options when it comes to building decks. So for example, let me give you a great example of a type of card that I think is super well balanced and super well designed. Like Supercell knocked it out of the park on distraction troops. When you're building a deck, you are looking for like cheap cards that, you know, it's a couple bodies for a few elixir to distract things like mini P.E.K.K.A.s and bandits and things like that. Skeletons cost 1, goblins at 2 cost, goblin gang at 3, guards at 3, skeleton army. There are so many different options that all see tournament play, and all of them are balanced really well against each other. Like there's a very logical reason why I would use skeletons or goblins or goblin gang or skarmy or whatever. The only ugly duckling in the entire setup there is maybe spear goblins. Spear goblins could maybe use a little bit of a buff, but like that's it, right? And if you want to throw in cards like Fire Spirit and Ice Spirit into that cheap cycle bundle, you've got over a half dozen cards that are all very balanced and very interesting, intricate decisions between them that are accessible to pretty much all players because at worst, guards and Skarmy are epics and everything else is commons and rares. One slot, though, that I think is actually suffering really badly, and it's part of the reason why we see so many Electro Wizards, partially because I think Electro Wizard's just a hair too strong. I would probably nerf Electro Wizard if I was them, but pretending Electro Wizard is balanced, even in that case, if you're looking at the common and rare options for, like, let's say 3 and 4 cost ranged attackers, like I have a tank deck, I need something to back up my giant. I'm looking at my options of ranged attackers to play. Every common and rare one is very basic and very generic and doesn't really do a lot. You have archers, you have musketeer, you're gonna have flying machine, and then you got wizard. I mean, there's like a couple, right? But they're all pretty straightforward. Wizard might be the most versatile of them, but wizard is, of course, the most expensive and dies to lightning, so he's kind of like a tough choice. But for the most part, you've got single target, damage, medium to long range. That's it, right? That's all they do. Now, look at the legendary, just the legendaries. Let's even leave epics out of this. In the epic field, you've got things like Executioner and Witch that have multi-mechanics and do a lot of stuff. But just looking at legendaries, you've got Princess, who is very long-range splash damage, who can be used as a defensive troop, as a split pusher, can be used as a harassment tool at the river. There's just a lot of uses for Princess, and she only costs 3. You get Ice Wizard, tough dude, doesn't die to fireball, splash damage, slow effect, good against skeletons and air attackers, and just pretty versatile and great against tanks because of the slowing effect. Electro Wizard comes in with a zap, Forked Bolt, stuns on each side of the Forked Bolt. Great card, right? And when you combine the damage, it only does like 20% less than a Musketeer. So if you're willing to take a 25% DPS nerf on a Musketeer, you get another spell, right? You get Zap in your hand. You get stun effects. You get Forked Bolt instead of single shot when necessary. You get a whole bunch of stuff for an Electro Wizard. And all of those cards are legendary. And that's why I think you're seeing an increase in the number of legendary cards in tournament decks. It's not because Supercell is drunk on money and that they want to release all these super powerful legendary cards. I just think from a design standpoint, they're thinking if we want to make a card with multiple mechanics, it has to be epic or legendary. And then over the course of 6-7 months, all of these really cool versatile cards are coming out at the higher rarities and making deck building, I think, a lot more difficult for free-to-play players.
So you want... Ooh, so that's a tough task, Rum. So you want them to create cards that are just more versatile at lower level rarities?
Yeah, but check it out. They're already doing that. I actually think that they're doing a pretty good job of it in the sense that Cannon Cart just came out. It's an epic, does a couple things, right? Very unique.
It's an epic still, though.
It's an epic, but check it out. Battle Ram was great. Battle Ram, yes. I mean, awesome card.
Agreed.
Huge addition to the family for commons and rares. Skeleton Barrel, I'm the most excited about out of the cards that are about to come out. It's either going to be the next card released or the one after it. Mm-hmm. It's like Battle Ram, right? It's a two-phase card. It's a win condition that you will be able to play along with things, you know, like you put a knight in front, you have the Skeleton Barrel behind it. Like most common win conditions, you'll be able to over-level it. So you'll be able to have, you know, a higher level, pretty sturdy skeleton balloon that'll get there. And that's going to be a great card on defense. I mean, every time that maybe something like an Executioner crosses the river or a Musketeer crosses the river, you can drop the balloon right in front of the Skeleton Barrel in front of it, and they're going to waste a lot of shots killing the barrel. And while your tower is killing it, they end up killing the barrel, it drops the skeleton army, and then if you are quick with a Miner or a Hog Rider or whatever, you can make use of that defensive skeleton army that came out of the balloon.
That's a really good point. That's a good point. I think Skeleton Barrel will be a strong card. I love that it's a common too. So yeah, that's a good rebuttal there. So other than just that, and then just making stronger or more versatile cards, more useful cards at the more common and rare win condition, do you think that they need to change up their philosophy on making those cards normally the more complex cards epic and legendary, or either making them easier to unlock? That would be my solution. I think that legendaries and epics should be a little bit easier to unlock, and they moved in that direction with the challenges, having a free entry and stuff like that. I don't mind that they're difficult to level up per se. I mean, they should be a little bit more difficult to level up because they're a higher rarity, but I think that people should have the opportunity to at least play them at tournament level standard. Do you think that's any of that kind of ties in with how to fix the power creep issue, or how to kind of prevent it, build preventative measures for it becoming a real big issue?
Yeah, I think that it's a tough nut to crack, right? Because what you don't want, I think here's what they can do. I think they could make commons and rares at higher arenas more comfortably complex, right? And that'd be okay. I think they're smart to keep arena 1, 2, 3, 4 very simple, right? Keep that your giant and musketeers and your knights and goblins stuff, or keep those very straightforward. But for a lot of players, once you hit 3,000 trophies, I mean, you're not green anymore, right? You're not a rookie here. You can handle this very complicated stuff. So while I think Heal, for example, very interesting, cool card there in Hog Mountain, when they add more commons to Hog Mountain, I think that's the great spot for things like your Battle Rams, your Skeleton Barrels, that sort of stuff. So I think you can start to see more complicated cards. Another thing they could do is there's actually a lot of great cards sitting around in the early arenas that could use a little bit of a buff. We mentioned, 65 or 68 out of 75 cards have been seen. 2 cards that haven't been seen much. Tesla Tower. Tesla Tower hasn't been around in forever. And now that you have something like Electro Wizard that shows the forked bolt mechanic and the stun mechanic and all that, I feel like Tesla Tower could have one of those things, like whether it's a stun or whether it's the forked bolt, probably not both, but that would make Tesla Tower have a reason to exist, because now it doesn't do anything, right? It's like a worse cannon or a worse Inferno Tower. But if it was something like a forked bolt tower, well, then you have a defensive tower that is specifically designed to fight swarms. People have been asking for like an air only tower. I would just take like a forked bolt thing that could either kill minions pretty quickly or double up on damage against the Inferno and baby dragons. Like, that'd be cool. I used to think Goblin Hut needed more mechanics. I wish Goblin Hut spawned like stab goblins when it died, but Pompeo's that hut spam wizard deck that's been doing pretty well in the CCGS, that's playing Goblin Hut, so maybe that card is good enough as is and doesn't need any sort of buff.
It's always tough to decipher whether the pro is just that godlike that they can make anything work, or whether, hey, they're onto something here. I could actually use that deck. But before we let you go, I wanted to just rapid fire here, Rum. If we can go through the main decks or the main archetypes in the game. You actually authored the rock paper scissors Reddit post, geez, like over a year ago now, one of the first people to define what the main archetypes in Clash Royale were going to be. At that time you said it was Siege, Beatdown, and Control. First quick question is, do you think it's changed at all? There's a lot of bait, there's a lot of chip, there's a lot of like bridge spam decks. Do you kind of see them as a hybrid, or do you see it has expanded the archetypes in game?
I never really authored that post with the intention that these were rigid archetypes that nothing would ever change, but I really see it as more of a mindset. So for example, let's say you and I are both playing Goizen, right? We're both playing a giant poison deck. That is demonstrably a beatdown deck, but you could play that deck like a control deck if you were bad at the game, right? But like, you know what I mean? Like if you were like terrified of committing a giant and always just sat back and tried to play counterattacks and only tried to play defense, and then maybe just played a giant at the river when you thought you had just made a good defense, like that's a way to play a beatdown deck like a control deck. It's more of the mindset of how you're committing your cards and what method you're taking to win the game. Now, the best way to win is, of course, to have a deck that does really well at one of the mindsets and then be in that mindset when you play it. I've been playing Golem forever, and I think one thing when I watch a lot of Golem players play and I give them feedback on their gameplay, they seem really terrified to put the Golem on the board. I mean, they put an Elixir Collector down, and then they spend the rest of the time really trying to defend their Elixir Collectors, trying to defend their towers, and not doing the beatdown thing. Like, you have to remember, if you're playing Golem, most decks can't handle a Golem, so get one on the board no matter what. There's a lot of times where you'll put something like a Golem down and be willing to take damage on your other tower because you are building towards this ultimate push that's going to knock down towers and do it. But I see so many control players have a hard time adapting because they don't know when to just not take damage, to take the damage or let them beat up your collector or whatever, because you are working towards some sort of bigger plan. Now, going back to what we were saying, I think when the game first came out, there were so many one-dimensional single-path cards that I didn't really believe in January 2016 that there were hybrid decks, and there probably wasn't because there's only 4 cards in the game and nothing really did multiple things. But you're right. Now that we have troops that double as spells, or spells that double as direct damage, or troops, cards like Goblin Barrel that can function either as like a defensive troop or as an offensive attack. They can be played by themselves, or they can be played with other tanks. The versatility that is enabled is through the roof now compared to what it was a year and a half ago. And I definitely think that you start to get decks that can switch between the mindsets very well depending on the matchup. One deck that I've been really impressed by is the Mortar decks. The Mortar minor decks are kind of making a comeback. We've seen a lot of them in the CCGS here the last couple days. And those decks are sort of like great hybrids between control decks and siege decks, because ideally they're putting a Mortar at the river and trying to get that Mortar to lock onto your tower. But most people are really good at playing against siege decks now. It's not like it was a year and a half ago where you could just flop a Mortar down and people put giants. I watch the Helsinki tournament every like 2 to 3 months.
Don't remind me,
and I am
Come on.
Mortified at myself. You made the top 8. You have nothing to be ashamed of.
No, I'm ashamed because if you go back and watch it, like, it's pathetic. I mean, if anybody wants to really get a good laugh, go back and watch like my matches against Steroidy in the from Finland tournament. Like, I don't even think I was reacting to the Mortar. Like, I think I was just spamming. I don't even know what I was doing, but it was
I'll throw you under the bus, Ash. Here's what happened. Back then, we all thought, and this is myself included, we all thought the best way to block Mortar was with buildings. So every time he played a Mortar, you were dropping a Goblin Hut in the middle. But you were that's fine. That's a fine answer. But you were playing a Royal Giant deck. Like, all you had to do was drop the Royal Giant across from the Mortar, and the Royal Giant would kick the crap out of it. But we didn't know. We were so young. But no, you're right. Like, so I think what you're seeing now is you see decks that are like, they can drop Mortar, and if you don't block the Mortar, then it's a siege deck. It's gonna win via siege condition. If you don't have the ability, like if you don't have Knights and Ice Golems, or they're out of cycle, or you drop a Golem behind the King Tower, and then they get that very first Mortar to get your tower down low enough where they can rocket it, that's it. You're a siege deck. Game over. But in a lot of cases, that's not going to work. So these decks also run like Miner and Poison, or like Miner, Fireball, and maybe like Minion Horde, and they have this ability to randomly switch to like a Miner Fireball deck. If you're blocking the Mortar over and over, then they just throw the Miner on the tower. If you try to defend it, then you're getting beat up like a chip cycle deck would get beat up, or beat you up. And then then if you don't have the answer to the Minion Horde, they can kind of play like a Miner Minion Horde sort of beat down attack and prey on the fact that you can't stop one of the lines of attack they can put together. So I definitely think that hybrid's a lot more viable, but I do think that those mindsets are as true today as they were a year ago. Like when you're playing a deck, if you have a beat down line of play, you need to think about how can I put that together and be willing to sacrifice other things. If you're a control deck and you're planning on winning this game 1-0, then yeah, man, you got to not take damage. No matter what, you have to sit there and try to make positive elixir trades while not taking damage. I think the really kind of the to sum it all up is that because cards can play in multiple archetypes now, because cards like Electro Wizard are both a great beatdown card and a great control card, it's possible to build an 8-card deck that can play both, maybe not as effectively, right? Like your Mega Knight counterattack chip deck is not going to be as good of a beatdown deck as a pure committed golem deck. But if you can play both styles at a world-class level, then yeah, these decks are getting a lot more versatile, but also a lot more interesting to play and watch and cast.
Yeah, that makes sense as far as, the hybrid kind of entering into what was like the foundational, 3 archetypes of the game. Before we let you go, real quick, what do you see as the big winners and the big losers as far as deck types, archetypes, whatever, after the balance changes / Mega Knight?
Barbarians can't catch a break. Like, no. I actually cannot remember the last time that a card came out where I was like, oh man, Barbarians is good against that card. Like at all, right? Like, yeah. Battle Ram, maybe? Like, I don't know. It's been a while. So yeah, I definitely think Barbarians, which were already kind of losers, 4 big old dumb losers in a group, they get even more losery when Mega Knight jumps and squishes all 4 of them. Mm-hmm. Graveyard has taken a really big hit because of Ice Wizard being a really good counter to it, and then Mega Knight is now also a pretty good counter, but it's still around. So it's a testament to the power of that card that even getting more than a 10% nerf to its effectiveness and introducing more counters, that it's still floating around the fringes of the meta. Big winners, I mean, Electro Wizard, I feel like has been a winner since the day it that card was a winner back when it died to Fireball, and then they buffed it to not die to Fireball, and I think it's just been probably the premier support troop ever since. But with the introduction of cards like Bandit, Mega Knight, things that have a little bit of a charge up, stunning it and resetting that even for like a half second can give you that crucial bit of time to drop an intercepting troop like a Knight right next to them or a skeleton army around. P.E.K.K.A. has been a huge winner. Pretty much since the bridge spam meta. P.E.K.K.A. did not exist pre-bridge spam meta, but as a counter to Battle Ram, Bandit, and now especially Mega Knight. If you've been requesting P.E.K.K.A.s for the last 6 months, this is your time in the sun.
Absolutely. Do you think that the old school PPP deck could come back? Dark Prince after the buff and the Prince and the P.E.K.K.A., or you're not really seeing it?
I've been thrilled that Dark Prince has come back. I actually don't think Dark Prince is good enough, yet in Latin America specifically, he's all over the place. There's a 3 Musketeers deck that's running Dark Prince as one of its tanks, and it's already won some CCGS qualifiers down in Latin America, and it's been in the finals of several others. So Dark Prince seems like he's sort of kind of back. I don't know if he's just a trend or whatever, but Prince is my favorite card, and I feel like Prince has just been out of it forever because for the most part, you'd be willing to spend 2 extra elixir on P.E.K.K.A., and because there's so many good defensive options now, the Prince isn't really a threatening offensive attack like he used to be. But I guess there's hope down the line because at ESWC this weekend, I saw a couple different decks running Prince. Prince actually goes pretty well with Mega Knight. Mostly because Mega Knight obviously is really good at killing swarms. but the thing he struggles with is single target bodies.
Yeah.
So what happens is if you have the Mega Knight on defense and he's starting to counterattack, you can drop a Prince behind him, and if they try to block with Valkyrie, Knight, even something like P.E.K.K.A., the significant single target damage of a charging Prince and then all the follow-up attacks has actually done a pretty good job of burning down whatever's distracting the Mega Knight, and then you get a charger and a leaper both continue their sort of snowball attack onto the tower. I don't know if it's going to be the best Mega Knight deck, but it's certainly what I'll be trying over the next few weeks, because Prince, my favorite card. Got to figure out a way to keep this guy in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I would do to Prince, and maybe this would make him too strong, but I would actually increase his charge damage just a little tick up, because like you said, it's so easy to stop him now. And back when he was introduced, well, back when the beginning of the game existed, it was a little bit more difficult. But now there's just, there's so many low HP troops in every single deck that it's just like a kind of a joke. And now there's the log. There's so many things that can reset his charge. So I think you should just get rewarded a little bit more if you can make him, make contact with a mid HP unit or even a Princess Tower off the charge.
Yeah, do you remember back when Prince used to have a faster charge speed? I kind of wish that they would revert that nerf. Dark Prince and Prince both got like a 13 or 15% nerf to their speed. Yeah. I sort of wish that came back because, I'd like Prince to be more of an offensive attack. I, in general, wish the last thing that I'd wish for the game, and I think this would actually solve a lot of people's complaints about power creep and the commons versus rares versus legendaries, is I actually wish they would do something to prevent over-leveling of commons, like a Clash of Clans style mechanic where you cannot level cards past your own player level, or whatever the equivalent level would be, right, on tournament cap. So with the idea there is that the reason why cards like Royal Giant and Elite Barbs do not exist in the tournament scene is because they've been nerfed based on how good they are at over-leveling on the ladder.
So true.
And if you could not over-level commons, that would make Royal Giant and Elite Barbs not these terrors that they are right now, and then you could actually buff them so they'd be good enough in tournaments. I think Elite Barbs are one of the coolest, most exciting cards. Pre-Mega Knight, that was the cards I was really excited for, and they were really fun for a while, just as a really good punish mechanic. They're exciting to attack with and defend against, but the nature of being able to over-level them made them too strong on the ladder, and now they're nerfed pretty much out of existence. I mean, there's a lot of stuff where Elite Barbs would be good against. They'd be good against Bandit. They're good against Hog Rider and Battle Ram and things like that. But they're so weak for their cost that you end up just not playing them and playing, P.E.K.K.A. instead.
Yeah, totally agree with you there. I think that RG and Elite Barbs are just unfortunate situation. Not only are they the most hated cards, but they're also not very effective at tournament level standard. But hey, man, we've been talking quite a while. I just wanted to thank all the viewers for hanging in there. I really actually enjoyed this conversation. I felt like it even got better, like a nice wine. It got better in time, Rum. Any parting words? Anything coming up on your channel that we should be aware about?
So if you haven't checked me out already, please come over to the YouTube channel titled The Rum Ham. That's where I do my videos. I've been spending the summer trying to find my path in this world, trying to decide what I'm doing. And the most popular thing on my channel is easily the Draft Royale tournaments. I'm going to kick up a fall season of Draft Royale starting very soon. If you've never heard of it, it is an 8-player tournament format where players choose their decks one card at a time against the other players. So if we were drafting, I'd pick Electro Wizard. Now nobody other player could pick Electro Wizard. And it's very strategic, very deep. A lot of pros have tried their hand at it. I'd say actually pretty much every pro you brought on your channel has at one point or another played a Draft Royale tournament, and many of them I've won them before. It's definitely one of the most exciting ways to play and watch Clash Royale. So if you've ever seen one of those, come on by, watch the most recent Draft Royale $1,000 tournament championship. Got some really good guys like Crap in there doing their best.
Nice, man. Well, I'll definitely include, obviously, a link to the channel. You guys make sure you subscribe to the Rum Ham's channel, especially for that series. I love the draft Royale challenges you do. Is there a way to incorporate is there a way for like your average Joe watching to participate in these tournaments, or is it kind of pro only right now?
When I do my live streams on Twitch and YouTube, we let people who are in the chat come in. Normally it's for subscribers on Twitch, but we've done a lot more openings recently because the demand was so high. The most recent $1,000 tournament series I did was just open to everybody.
Nice. Nice. People love to hear that. So, man, thanks again for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, buddy. It's always a good time seeing you in person. Hopefully we'll cross paths soon enough.
I suspect we will, my friend, but time will tell. So another huge shout out to Rum Ham, guys. Make sure you go give him some love. Say you came from my channel, why not? And huge shout out to Bren Chong, my YouTube partner. Check him out in the description below. Guys, thank you so much for watching. And as always, take care, guys.